Stick around till the end and I'll show you exactly how I used the tomahawk to make sure I didn't freeze to death while I was making the video. At the time it was minus 10 degrees Celsius or about minus 14 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was everything I could do to get warm. Alright guys, so I've made lots of changes to my tomahawk since I've got it. I'm pretty much all done it. I'm pretty happy with it right now. So I have a sharpener and a fire steel here on the front. I made a pouch for it in a belt loop. So for my belt loop I have two different options. I can slide my belt through, or I can undo these snaps and then snap it inside my belt. My belt will also help hold those snaps closed as well. The other thing I did is I restained the handle. I put some markings on the handle as well, so we can tell exactly how big an object is. The other thing I did is I polished the blade to make it easier and faster to cut there as well. So I'll walk you guys through exactly how to do that. But before I do that, I wanted to see exactly how well it cuts now that I'm all done. Today what I'm going to take a look at is this nice little green box that I got here from Columbia River Knife and Tool. So I ordered this on Amazon. So let's open it up and take a look and see what's inside. So inside the package here, we're going to have our axe head. We'll take our elastic band off and we'll take it out. So when I first took it out of the package, it did have a silicone protector over the head just to make sure that no one got injured or anything. I don't know where I put that, so I didn't put it back on for this video. But I just opened it up, put the handle on, checked to see how sharp it is. If we take a close look at the edge, you can actually see that it's not all that sharp. On the underside cut there, it's so dull that you couldn't cut yourself on that even if you tried. For our handle, your handle's pretty straightforward to put in. To put your handle on, you're going to slide it through. The handle at the other end is a little bit wider. You can hardly tell looking at the video, but it is a little bit wider. It's then going to give you a compression fit. Now looking at the fit on the head, it's not bad at all, especially compared to my cold steel tomahawk that I have. This one fits on quite a bit better. You can see there is a little bit of a gap there. So I'm going to see if I can get this on a little bit tighter just to close up that gap a little bit. Now currently on our handle, there is a shellac type coating on the handle and it's a little bit rough there as well. So your hand's not going to slide on that at all. The other thing that I feel that it's missing is going to be a lanyard hold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some modifications to this. First and foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen the tomahawk head because it's extremely dull. If it's not sharpened, it's not going to work properly. As far as the actual head itself goes, I don't see a need to make any other modifications. I'm also going to do some leather work. I'll make a case for it and I'll make a belt loop for it so that it's a little bit easier to carry. So the overall weight for this tomahawk is just under 2 pounds. Most of that weight is going to be in our tomahawk head. So for our handle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip off all the lacquer. The burning pattern on this doesn't look too bad. After I strip off the shellac that's on the handle, I'm going to smooth it out a little bit just so that it can have that little bit of slide, so your hand can slide down a little bit as you're chopping to get a little more power behind that swing. I'm also going to drill a hole into the handle right here to put a lanyard through it as well. So let's get started with the modifications and then we'll take it outside and we'll see how well it works. All right, so before I start to make my sheath out of leather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cardboard template. Now with that template, I'm just doing that to make sure that I have approximately the right proportions so that I'm not having to throw out all kinds of extra leather. So what I'll do to start with is I'm going to take my pen. I'm going to go all the way around where I want my sheath to be. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to take a marker. I'm going to add an extra 1/4 inch all the way around. That's going to give me my room for my stitching. So to do that, the tip of my marker is about a 1/4 inch. So I'll take that and I'll go all the way around. Now on the bottom, I'm going to want a little bit of extra material there as well, because if we look at the bottom of the axe, where our beard is here, it does get a little bit wider. So that's probably about a 1/2 inch. So we're going to need to add about another 1/4 inch so that we can make up for that space as well. So I'll probably start about 1/3 the way up. I'll start relatively close, and by the time I get to the end, I'm going to add that whole width again. So I'll do the same thing along the top, only I'm just not going to add quite as much room around it. I'm also going to need a belt loop, so I'll cut that out and lay it out with the paper as well. We'll carefully cut out our template, ensuring that we have the right size and shape, and then we'll dry fit our template just to verify that everything's going to fit the way we think it's going to. Once we're happy with our template, we're going to transfer that onto a piece of leather. Once we have the leather cut out, we'll be able to sew that together. Alright, I'm at a point now where I'm going to start making some modifications to it. I've already made a new belt hook for my tomahawk. I've also made a new cover for it as well. What I'll do is I'll drill a hole in the handle so I can put a lanyard on it, and I'm going to sharpen the tomahawk to start with, and then we'll take it outside to see how well that works. The other thing I want to do while I have it in here in the basement, I'm going to strip all the shellac off of it, and I'm going to stain that instead. And I'm going to smooth the handle off a little bit so it'll slide a little bit in your hand as well. So let's get started. So I want to go about 1 inch up. Maybe I'll actually get a measure tape and measure that. The other thing I think I'll do is I'll mark 1 inch lines going all the way up to about 1 foot so that I can use that for other things. Alright, so I got my line on approximately 1 inch up, and I'm pretty much centered with the handle, so I'm pretty happy where that hole is going to end up. So we'll turn that on. There's our new lanyard hole. So let's strip this down and get the shellac off. Now before I strip the shellac off, I am going to have to move my drill press. The work area I have isn't all that big, so let me get this out of the way and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm not sure what grit sandpaper this is, but I think it's probably the roughest sandpaper that I have, so that's what I'm going to start with. What you want to do while you're sanding is just make sure you're always keeping that moving the whole time. You're not holding it still in one spot. Otherwise, what I'm going to end up doing is taking bulb spots out of that. And I want to keep the same basic general shape. Now the head on it to start with was pretty tight. I wanted to fit my head again just to make sure I haven't taken too much material off. So my head's still really tight. As we can see, we pretty much have no gap all the way around. Most of the heads that I've seen on other videos as well, for these have been quite tight as well. Unlike my cold steel tomahawk, I had to do a lot of work to make sure that fit on properly. What I'm going to do is take the handle, measure out in 1/2 inch increments, and I'm going to go from 1 all the way up to 1 foot so that I can use this as a ruler out in the field. So I'm going to do that on the back side. So I don't have a wood burner, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my soldering iron, put a clean tip on it, and I'm just going to solder that in. I did make that line too long, so I am going to erase that line just a little bit. Okay, so it only took about 10 seconds for this soldering iron to heat up. It doesn't take any time at all. I've already started to make my first line before I realized it wasn't recording. Just get at it. I double checked all my lines, make sure I was happy with them, and I erased that one a little bit as well. Alright, so it only took me about a minute or two to burn that in. I've had wood burners that won't burn wood half as well as this soldering iron does. I found this is the best thing that works for me personally. The other thing I'm going to do here is we do have some spots that are darkened down where it's been burnt. I want to do that, make that a little more prominent in a few areas since I sanded it off. So I'm going to take my heat gun right here. So what I'm going to do is produce a similar effect to what I did on my other Tomahawk. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly take my time. I'm going to go over it. If you don't have a heat gun, the other option that you could use would be a blowtorch, which works just as well. Alright, so I'm a lot happier with that. It still needs a little bit of a sand. I see there's a few little shiny spots from the shellac. I had already planned to take a finer grit sandpaper to that, so I'm going to do that next. There, I'm pretty happy with that right now. What I'm going to do next is put my soldering iron away, and I'm going to get some stain out, and I'm going to stain the handle. Alright, I don't want to dig a paintbrush out for this project, just because it's going to be really quick. It's really small. So what I'm going to do is I just ripped off a piece of a rag. I'm going to open the stain up, mix it up, and then I'll stain the handle. Now I dipped that into the jar just to make sure that we're getting the inside of the hole stained as well. Just to make sure we're protecting every bit of it. So I'm pretty happy with that right now. I'm going to give that about 20 minutes or so for the stain to dry. Then I'll give it another coat. While I'm doing that, I'm going to sharpen the head of the Tomahawk. So I've been thinking about the best way to sharpen this. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my small knife sharpener, run it through the bevel. That's going to take off the most material as quickly as possible on both sides evenly. Then I'll go to my work sharpener and do a better job with that. Now I looked everywhere for my Sharpel sharpener and I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere as I thought it possibly could be. I looked for about a half an hour and I still have not found it at all, so we're going to try and use a file instead. Alright, so we'll put our second coat on. We'll dip it right in there just to get a little more in the hole. Then we'll start liberally applying our second coat. So this is getting pretty close to what I want it to look like when it's finished. Now, it's probably going to take 1 to 2 more coats to actually get it to look like this while it's dry. So we'll give that a few more minutes and then we'll apply a third coat. The other thing, whenever you're taking your gloves off, pinch it at the palm of your hand, pull it down as you pull your hand out, then grab the top of your glove, pull it over your fingers, and you'll have both gloves inside each other, and you won't get any stain on you at all. Now, between the first and the second coat of stain, I spent that entire 20 minutes trying to sharpen the Tomahawk head using a file. However, it's really slow going and it's not removing a whole lot of material. I also tried my work sharpener on this as well, but unfortunately, this doesn't remove enough material. So I do need to find something else. I'm going to take another look and see if I can find my Sharpel sharpener. Look for another 20 or 30 minutes or so. Hopefully I'll be able to find it. So right now I'm on my third and final coat of the handle. I still haven't found my Sharpel sharpener. I'm still taking a look for that, because really that's going to be what I need to be able to sharpen this axe effectively. Now for my Sharpel sharpener, it took me a while to find it. Where I ended up finding it was that it was actually fell down on the floor and it was underneath my dresser. Now this sharpener really removes a lot of material. You can actually hear it scraping that material off. It's taking huge chunks out of both sides very, very evenly, making it so that we can get that very sharp edge. You'll also notice periodically I'm just sharpening a small piece of the blade. This is because it's a little bit duller for that part of the blade and I want to make sure that I get this as sharp as I possibly can. For the sharp edge on the axe's beard, I'm going to do the exact same thing where I'm going to remove that material to get that nice and sharp on that side as well. So we have a nice little pile of shavings there that we took off with the Sharpel sharpener. This seems to be doing the best just for this particular blade, just because we do need to remove quite a bit of material. We want to keep that as consistent on both sides as we possibly can. That's allowing us to do that. So what I'll do next, I'm just going to run it through the ceramic rod a couple times just to clean up any burrs or anything that are on it. Alright, that's as sharp as we really need it for an axe. We don't need it so sharp that you're going to be able to shave with it, but this is going to be excellent for when we actually go outside now. So let's run outside real quick. So the tree right here is one that came down in the last storm that we had, and the tomahawk's making really short work of all the branches on it. Although I love the rustic pattern on the face of the axe, that rustic pattern on it also slows the axe down because it increases the friction. So I might end up removing some of the material off that so it's nice and smooth to make it a little bit easier to chop and cut through wood. As far as using the tomahawk to split wood, it is a 2-pound head and it cuts through wood very nicely. Typically I'm cutting through the logs within 1 to 2 swings. So on the trail just behind my mother's house, there is a lot of trees that are down there as well. So I'm going to deal with some of those. So with that, I'm going to take those branches off. I'm also going to cut those trees with the tomahawk as well, so that we can get those out of the way. As you can see in the video, I'm getting nice big chunks of wood out of the tree as I'm chopping through it. I didn't quite make the V-notch cut in the log big enough, which is making it a little bit harder for me to cut that last little bit through the tree. It hasn't gotten any duller. There's no nicks in the blade. I'm pretty happy with this. So after a little more thought, I decided I'm going to make a few more modifications to my tomahawk just to make it that much more useful for myself. I'm going to add my Sharpel sharpener to the scabbard on the axe head so that I'm always going to be able to have that with me. With the Sharpel sharpener, that's going to give me a carbide sharpener. It's going to give me a ceramic sharpener. It'll also give me a diamond sharpener, a fishhook sharpener, a whistle, and a fire steel that's always going to be with my axe all the time. And I'm going to sew that onto the head of the tomahawk scabbard. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make its paper template so I can ensure that I cut the leather out to the right size for the case. Once I've completed my template, I'll transfer that onto a piece of leather and I'm going to cut that out. Once I have everything all cut out, I'm going to punch holes into the leather. Then I'll dry fit the Sharpel inside the case to make sure it's going to fit. Now my intention here is I'm going to do an X stitch across the whole thing. While I'm dry fitting this to figure out the best angle to put the case on, I decided I'm going to change how I'm going to stitch it. I'm going to stitch it directly into the existing holes on the sheath, so I'm not weakening the leather by putting additional holes in it. This is also going to change how it fits inside the case a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a box stitch along the bottom. This is going to give it a lot of strength along that edge where those two seams meet up and do the best possible job connecting the two together. And because I'm changing the stitch that I plan to do, I realize it might change that spacing a little bit. So I just want to dry fit it quickly to make sure that it's still going to fit in properly. Now that I've completed sewing the bottom, before I sew the sides together, I want to sew the top as well because I'm not going to be able to put the thread through here afterwards. I'm going to continue with a box stitch here as well to give it that maximum amount of strength. And then along the sides, what I'll do is I'll do an X stitch so that I'm keeping that spacing. Alright, so once I got everything all sewed up, it did certainly fit in. It is a very tight fit and it's not going to come out easily. And because of how I modified the bottom stitch from an X stitch to a box stitch, I'm not going to have enough room to close that flap. In order to get it out, I've actually made it so tight that I can't get it out without using pliers, so I'm going to have to do some more modifications to it as well. What I decided my best option is to cut the flap off altogether, leave a little bit of extra material on the one side that I have it stitched, so I'm not having to restitch everything, and then place it back in. This is going to make it so that it comes in a lot easier, although it's still quite tight in there. Although it is able to be pulled out and placed back in by hand without too much trouble. Now I really intend for this tomahawk to be a real workhorse, so I decided after some more thought that I am going to remove that texture so it's able to chop and slice a little bit better. Because I've already sharpened the blade, I'm going to put some tape on it so that I'm not at risk of getting injured by the blade being sharp and coming across the blade. To remove that texture, I'm going to use a random orbit sander. If that doesn't work, I'll go to my grinder and I'll remove it with a grinder, but I'd prefer not to use a grinder for it. After about 45 minutes of using the random orbit sander, I still hadn't gotten some of these deeper gouges out. So I did end up switching to a grinder at that point, and then going back to the sandpaper on the random orbit sander to polish it, to grind it down a little more, and then to polish it with a higher grit pad afterwards. So after switching back and forth between the grinder and the random orbit sander for about another half an hour, I got it to a point where I was fairly happy with it. It's much smoother than what it used to be. You could feel the amount of drag that you got off the side before. Now it just slides right, your hand slides right over it. Now I'm not sure if I dulled the blade at all while I was polishing the sides. I just wanted to sharpen the blade a few more times just to verify that I hadn't dulled the blade at all and that it is as sharp as possible. Hi everybody, we're going to chop this tree down that's right beside us here. It's just on the other side of the creek, so we'll head over there now. Oh shit. Okay, that's about as cold as I want to get. Alright guys, so I just fell in the brook. It's really cold out. I'm still quite a ways from the house. I have that tree I just chopped down a few minutes ago. I have some dry branches off of it. So I'm going to start a real quick fire with my tomahawk here. And all I'm doing is snapping these smaller twigs so I can get this fire going right away. I got some of these bigger chunks that I cut off the tree here a few minutes ago. And I managed to scrounge some old man's beard from that tree as well. All right, while the fire gets going, I'm going to put my tomahawk away. Going to get a little bit warmer, and then I'm going to head back home. Now, to give you an idea exactly how big this tree is, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're about 10 inches around, 10.5 inches around. The chunks that are coming off of here are fairly large chunks. We're looking at about 3.5 to 4 inches and about 1/2 an inch thick for most of them. Now, just polishing the blade alone is making a huge difference in how hard it is to cut. It's taking a lot less energy to get that in there, sink it in a lot deeper. Before I was sinking in about 1/2 an inch. Now I'm typically sinking in up to 2 inches into that blade. So I'm pretty much all the way through here. It's just going to take a few more cuts. When I'm hitting it, I can feel that it's cracking and starting to give away now. So I'll just finish it off. There we go. It is now 2 separate pieces.